This is Brian Vaughn, CEO of Great Commission Media Ministries, and I've recently sat down with Dr. Hannu, our founder and president of IRR-TV and Great Commission Media Ministries, and asked him would he be willing to just relate some stories of transformational lives, changed lives by the power of Jesus Christ and through the mega city media campaigns. So he's done that. And I hope you enjoy and are blessed by this video. I'm just sitting down today with Dr. Hannu, who is the founder and president of IRR-TV. Founded this organization probably something like 25 years ago or so, and has been doing some major evangelistic campaigns around the world in numerous countries, particularly Russia, for many years, and other countries. But I did want to engage Hannu, since we've done probably over 65 or so of these city campaigns globally, and we do have a very strong global reach these days in targeting cities. Tell us some stories of people's lives that have been changed through the gospel.
Well, before I do that, let me say this, that when it comes to the Great Commission of Jesus Christ that Jesus gave us, to His church at large, collectively speaking, to us as individuals, for anyone that claims to be a follower of Jesus Christ, the Great Commission was given to us so that it might be fulfilled. There's no doubt about that. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have given it.
That's right.
In order for that to be fulfilled, in other words, you have to have a strategy, a well thought out strategy, with which people will be reached, a whole generation will be reached. Now, obviously, it wasn't given to one person or one individual or even to 10. It was given to the whole church. But the church really needs to think this through. They have to come up with a strategy that really works, that really does do the job, so to speak. And that was the challenge that we had. We had been in Christian ministry for many years, reaching the Soviet Union primarily by shortwave radio way back when. But times change, politics change, countries change, leaders change, circumstances change. What was effective 30 years ago, 40 years ago is no longer effective today. So we need to be able to come up with strategies that will really work today. And that's why we have these mega city campaigns, because these mega city campaigns, they target whole cities and big cities at that. For example, the city of Mumbai, which has a population of 22 million people, that was targeted just last year. And conventional missions doesn't think that way. A church will send a missionary in to do ministry with street children, or say to reach the red light district of some city, or Teen Challenge would do that, or you might want to be reaching the villages around a given city. There's just so many things that churches can do, and that's fine. Everything is needed, obviously. But if there is no overall strategy to reach whole population centers, the big cities of our world today, the Great Commission, will never be fulfilled.
And I guess when you talk about mega cities, there's over 400 of these such cities in the world today.
Yeah. And growing.
And growing. And we expect probably 75% of the world's population will live in these urban areas. Correct. In these cities in the near future, and it's probably at 51% already. Sure. Even in this year. Mm-hmm. So that's where we have to put a lot of our focus and attention. Mm-hmm. I've heard somebody say that the campaigns that we've been doing, if we left it up to the church and they use their conventional methodology to reach out to their city, what we are able to do with just all sorts of media, like a symphony of media, it would take them 100 years.
Well,
something like that.
Churches could not do this because they haven't had a vision to do this. And once they see the mega city campaign once, their eyes are actually opened as to the huge firepower of this kind of a campaign, when it really does come into a city and it does shake it up. It shakes the city. And churches really don't have a concept of that ever happening until they see something like this. So it's an eye opener. It's a vision casting event at the same time, as well as it's an outreach to say 20 million people out of 22 million. Pastors could not imagine to see those kinds of numbers in the way they do church, and therefore, there has to be an introduction of a strategy that really does start to work. And so in Mumbai, what happened was we had a symphony of media that was designed and tailor-made to reach almost every segment of society with different kinds of media. And in 30-45 days, we were able to reach about 20 million people. And those numbers come from the media agencies that work with secular advertising day in, day out. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Gucci, Samsung, and iPhone, everything. They market all these different products, and they know exactly what their media does. And so they told us that the media that we were using, the advertising that we were using, when it comes to outdoor advertising, the trains, 9 million people on the commuter trains every day, talking about television, you're talking about newspapers reaching 1 million people a day just through the major newspapers in Mumbai. All that told and calculated together, we came up to about 20 million people that had been reached. We had 400 phones working the call center, 24/7, intercepting calls from people across the city, Hindus, Muslims, calling, people who wanted to know more about Jesus. Then we've heard reports of people who had come to know the Lord in a miraculous way in Mumbai as a result of the campaign, and that work is still ongoing. We have the Alpha Course, which is now in the hands of key church leaders in Mumbai. They will be training up to 5,000 volunteers to use Alpha Course within the next 2 years. They have already trained the first 500. And they will be using the huge database that we collected in the Megacity campaign, and they will be going back with the Alpha Course saying that we'd like to invite you out to these special events or special meetings that we have in small groups. And so that's a huge follow-up process that will be underway, full strength, full power within the next year in Mumbai.
Do you have any changed life stories from Mumbai that you're aware of?
Yeah, we do. For example, the ex-police commissioner, which is the police chief for all of Mumbai, he's retired. A phone call came into the call center. The call was picked up. A pastor's wife happened to be the book courier in this given situation. She took the book because that was what was being asked for on the phone. She went to the given address. She walked in the door, and there was a group of 6 people, sitting, in the living room of that house. And it turned out that it was the ex-police commissioner's home. The commissioner was a retired man. And the commissioner had suffered from huge depression, so he actually didn't order the book himself. It was apparently his wife or one of the older children. In any case, he would look down day in and day out, never raise his eyes, never look at people. He would never get up out of bed at 7 in the morning, which was his habit. He would get up at noon. That would be the earliest he'd get up. He wouldn't take a shower. He hadn't been to shower, they said, in months. He had not gone out of the house for 6 months. And he was suffering from a serious case of depression. And so when the book courier came in, she said that, well, why don't I read 2 transformation stories out of the book? So she handpicked 2 transformation stories, and she started to read in Hindi, in the national language. And as she read, a visible change swept over the retired police commissioner's body, his being. And there was a transformation that was taking place. And before she left the house, all 6 people in that family had prayed to receive Jesus Christ as their Savior. A Hindu family. Next morning, a phone call came in to the pastor's wife, and it was from that home. And they said something dramatic has happened in the life of our father. He is a totally changed man after your visit yesterday and after we prayed the prayer of salvation. And so that was just a dramatic story of a whole family being changed. A very influential family. Without this campaign, there's no way that this family could ever have been reached. There was no contact. There were no bridges. But they happened to see this, the ads, and they responded to that, and that became the bridge for the book couriers to come into that home and to have the Holy Spirit do His work.
Wow, that's a powerful transformational story of a life and lives.
We've seen that happen over the years. For 15 years, the first city we were in was Volgograd. We never even knew how these mega city campaigns would work in Russia. And that was back in 2003, the very first campaign that we did. I remember that we were in the call center over there. The call center was smaller, obviously. We had something like, 15 phones in Volgograd. Massive ads and massive media all over the city. And one night we were in the call center, the phone rang, and one of my friends, a Russian, took the phone. And on the phone, there was a young guy, about 20 years of age. He was standing on the roof of a high-rise building, ready to jump off, commit suicide. And it was night. He had a cell phone, and he looked down to the street below, and he saw a big billboard with, God gives you the power to change. Figured, well, I might as well call the number. I mean, it's going to end anyway, so why not make just one call before I, end it all? And so he tapped the number to the call center on the phone, and he immediately started to tell a story when somebody answered. He was talking to a Special Forces commander in his previous life who had become a Christian in the Russian army. He had become a Christian, he had become a pastor, he had a 400-member church, and he was the guy that took the phone call. And this young guy is saying, I'm going to end my life. My girlfriend has forsaken me. My mother has disowned me. There is nobody in this world that loves me. There's no point. I'm going to end it all tonight. The Special Forces commander in his previous life, now a Christian, he said to the guy, he says, listen, don't you do anything of the kind. He said, you do exactly as I say. And he says, you turn around 180 degrees and you step backwards the same way you stepped to the edge of that roof. You step off towards the stairwell and you come downstairs all the way down to ground floor. And by the time you get there, I'll be there to meet you. And so the guy actually did. He hung up and he did exactly what the Special Force commander, ex-commander had said. And by the time he got downstairs, the ex-commander was there, and he took him and he brought him to a special event where there were about 100 young people that night, and they smothered him, quotation marks, symbolically speaking. They smothered him with love. Mm-hmm. They showed him how much people really cared about who he was and what he was, and his life was dramatically transformed. He was the same ex-commander, met him several years later on a train to Moscow. And the guy comes up to him, and the ex-commander didn't recognize him. But the young guy came up to him and says, you remember me? I was the guy that was on the roof ready to jump off that one night when I talked to you and you told me to come down. He said, I'm married. I'm a follower of Jesus. My wife is a follower of Jesus. We're married. We have kids, a couple of kids. I have a great job, and I'm going to Moscow on a business engagement. He said, things have worked out in a wonderful way in my life, and our whole family loves Jesus.
Anything else from that campaign or any other campaigns?
Another story from the city of Samara in Russia. Again, we had this huge campaign that was going on for 30 days. You get the most surprising of calls. There was another policeman from that particular city. He called, and his life was dramatically changed, and he told us his story. He said that I was driving one evening, down one of the main streets of the city of Samara, which is a great city in Russia. And he said, I was just totally devastated. My life had fallen apart. And he said, I was ready to commit suicide. And he said, actually, I started to weep because I couldn't see, because of the tears, I couldn't see where I was driving. I pulled off the road in the middle of the city, and I stopped my car. And when I finally was able to clear my eyes, I looked up and there was a billboard right in front of me saying that there is a way out. Experience the power to change. And he said, I took my cell phone, I called that number, And he said that led me to people who told me about how God can change the circumstances in my life, and that there is hope. I don't need the devastation. God can heal and he can restore. And he said his life was totally changed because of one billboard. And he's serving the Lord Jesus today in Samara, a police officer. Just happened to stop by a billboard because he couldn't see through his tears, he couldn't stay on the road, so he just pulled off, and it happened to be right in front of a billboard.
It's amazing how the Lord orchestrates situations like that.
Yeah, and it's just story after story. It's like thousands of stories, they keep repeating in different forms.
Sure.
In the city of Petrozavodsk, which is halfway between ex-Leningrad and Moscow, it's a city where my wife was actually raised, from a 3-year-old raised, and she went through school there. When we had that megacity campaign there, we had 200 book orders from the Air Force base just outside the city, from the Russian Air Force. So we delivered 200 books to that base, to the people, to the airmen serving at the air base. It was a military installation. And then in the same city, we got this wonderful, interesting call from a gentleman who said, when he was asked, well, do you have an address? You want the book? Okay. Do you have an address? He said, well, no. He says, you got to deliver it to me. I'm in my car. And it's kind of like a weird situation where we have to catch him in his car to deliver a book. Anyway, so they agreed on a spot where they would meet. It turned out that he was the mafia boss for the Russian mafia in that territory. And he said, I just wanted to make sure that you guys are telling the truth. If you guys say that we're going to get a free book, I just wanted to make sure that you actually deliver. He said, by the way, I do need the book.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you have all kinds of people. In Nepal, a call came into the call center. It was from the dean of the University of Kathmandu, which is the capital city. When that call came in, nobody knew it was a dean at that point. The person says, you have 3 minutes to tell me why I should live. Now that call was received by our office manager. His name was Pradeep. And Pradeep he comes from the upper caste in his former life before he became a Christian. So he was known to be an intelligent guy. He was known to be respected, but he was a follower of Jesus. And he took the phone call. And he said, before you do anything to yourself, please, 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 let me meet you and talk to you. I want to talk to you. And so the dean of the university accepted the offer, and so Pradeep traveled out to meet the dean. And for 3 hours, he spoke to the dean of the university, and that night, the dean's life was changed. Received the book on how to experience the power to change through faith in Jesus Christ, and his life was changed. You would think that it could possibly be wrong in the life of the dean of a university. I mean, okay, maybe somebody who has been rejected and neglected, is living out in the streets, doesn't have any money, maybe he needs Jesus. But this was the dean of the biggest university in all of Nepal, saying that my life has come to the point where, you have only 3 minutes to tell me why I should live. And yet in those circumstances, Jesus came into that person's life, and that person was saved.
Well, we've also done quite a few of the major cities in Israel. And have worked in with the Palestinians as well. Do you recall anything from there that came out of those campaigns? They
were very interesting campaigns because we were actually being discouraged from even conducting any such campaigns in Israel because some of the Messianic churches, their pastors or the leaders, some of them would tell us that Israel is such rock-hard soil that you're just wasting your time, you're wasting your money, you're wasting your effort. Don't come and don't do this. There will be no result. And by the way, if you have a call center and you expect calls, from Israel, consider yourself fortunate if you get 8 phone calls in a month from this country. Well, we went and we did the campaigns. We did several of them, but we did them in Hebrew for the Hebrews, for Hebrew-speaking Jews, Russian for the Russian-speaking Jews, and we also did Arabic for the Arabs living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And as a result of that, the call center received not 8 calls, but 70,000 telephone calls. And the pastors that were kind of like hesitant, saying, "Don't come, it's a waste of time," they had nothing to say. They were shocked when they heard the statistics, how much response had come in. Today there are new churches, we don't call them churches, today there are new congregations, Messianic congregations in Israel as a result of these campaigns. We know that there are at least 15 different locations where these small house churches, and some are big. One of them is 150 members in the Tel Aviv area. These new believers in Jesus congregate as a result of these campaigns. Every year we see multiple baptisms taking place in the Jordan River, where people, as fruit from these campaigns, receive the water baptism and become members of the church in Israel.
Do you recall any stories from the Palestinian side of things?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there was. We actually, as I said, we did campaigns in Gaza, we did campaigns in the West Bank, but we also did them in Nazareth, which is Palestinian nowadays. Plus, we did one in Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Well, we did one over there. We received 12,000 responses from the Muslims in those areas. 12,000 responses where these people wanted to know about the power that can change their lives, which comes through faith in Jesus. So there was a tremendous response, and there was a multiplication that took place in those churches. There were Palestinian churches even before the campaign, but they were strengthened, and there was multiplication taking place. Mm-hmm. I remember that when we were in the call center ourselves, this was in Bethlehem, calls were coming in, and I asked the supervisor to the call center, an Arab Christian. I said, "Well, tell me about these calls. What kind of calls are coming in?" And he said, "They're coming in from all segments of Palestinian society. We have psychiatrists, we have doctors, we have government officials, we have ministers in the Palestinian Authority, Ministry of Interior was it, there was the Ministry of Culture. They had called in to get their own personal books." He said they were just everywhere, from top to bottom and bottom to top. People were responding to the campaign. And so it has been extremely effective also over there.
Of course, Ukraine is highly in the news with the advances that Putin and Russia are making against Ukraine. Now, I know a number of years ago, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago or 5 years ago, we did one in Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, and then we've just now completed the one, I think the third largest city in Ukraine, Odessa.
It's a major city on the Black Sea.
About 2 million people in that area,
right,
or something like that. Do you recall any stories?
Well, it's still ongoing as we speak. We just know that they have run out of books. We printed 15,000 Power to Change books for the city, for the churches in that city. First, we thought that they would not need that. They would not need that many, but it turns out that they have now run out of books, and they have requested 50,000 additional books for follow-up purposes. And we need to somehow respond to that. We need to give them those because the books are a tool. They are the key tool in these campaigns that the churches and their volunteers use, to confront people or to approach people and share Jesus with them. Because the book has, it's got transformation stories in it locally. It has the prayer of salvation. It has the 4 spiritual laws. It explains the first steps of faith in Jesus, in your new life. It's a complete package, and so it's a tremendous asset for anyone who wants to share, Jesus with anyone. And so now we're suddenly looking at, a printing of 50,000 versus 15,000 that we did in the beginning. And there is something that is happening under the surface, in the city amongst the people living in Odessa. We didn't see a big surge through the call center itself, but when the churches sent their people out onto the streets and people were approached one-on-one, suddenly they saw what hunger and what spiritual thirst they had. And that's where they started to reap a harvest as they went out and as they talked to people on the streets. We asked ourselves, why was that in Odessa? Well, Odessa was gripped with fear because of because of an impending Russian invasion. City dwellers, they were fearing that the Russian tanks would be in the city, and their city would also be destroyed in the same way that Donetsk and Lugansk and Slavyansk were destroyed.
Now, these are other cities in the eastern part of Ukraine, near Odessa?
Yeah, that's right, just north of Odessa, in the same region. And so they thought that their fate would be the same. And when I was over there, of course, I have been there many times, before and after and during the campaign. Even on television in Odessa, you watch television on in the evening, and you see pictures of devastation. It's like an advertisement saying, East Ukraine wanted a Russian lifestyle, a Russian standard of living. They did not get the Russian standard of living. They got Chechnya, a war, just like the one that ravaged the Chechen Republic. We have received Chechen on our soil. And then the advertisement goes on to say, Odessa does not want to suffer the same fate as Donetsk and Lugansk and Slavyansk. And to have that on television, like multiple times every night on television channels in the city, that already tells you what kind of fear people were living under. But when people saw that they're being, approached one-on-one and there was a conversation taking place, suddenly they opened up and they reached out, which they were apprehensive to do, through the regular channels that we were used to. Also, 12 churches signed up in the very last week. We were almost through the campaign for the visible part of the campaign when 12 churches came forward and said, we want to join right now. We want to get involved. We have seen in the last week or two, we've seen what results are coming in, what the churches are, the kind of a harvest the churches are reaping. We want to join, can we?
Now, let me switch over to another part of the world, over in Iraq. We did a campaign in northern Iraq, in Erbil, and of course Iraq and ISIS, the caliphate there that's very hot in the news, it seems like these days. How did that happen, and do you have any change life stories from Iraq?
We do have a dramatic one, actually. First of all, we were able to conduct, together with the churches in the city of Erbil, northern Iraq, it's the biggest city in northern Iraq, we were able to conduct a megacity campaign a little over a year ago. And if you would have asked me prior to that, is it even possible to think of a megacity campaign, media campaign in the heart of the Islamic world, in a fanatically, hostile state called Iraq, I would have said it's not much of a chance. But God had different plans, and He led us, and He spoke to us, and He kind of He put the conviction into our hearts that we may think, that it's going to happen. We may not think we don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen because God has, led us that way. We received an invitation to come, to help, and we are willing to come in to investigate, to try to help. We didn't see a way. But dramatically, God did open the door. The commander for the security forces of all of northern Iraq, when he was approached by the Iraqi Christian leaders, asking for permission to conduct the campaign, the Iraqi security forces supreme commander said, well, now that you've explained what you want to do, you tell me what you want to say. What's the message of this mega city media campaign that you propose to conduct in this city of ours? And they said, changing the subject just a little bit, instead of saying power to change, they said power to forgive, power to reconcile. And when the security forces supreme commander heard that, he said, you have a green light to do that campaign now, and we will provide security for you.
So just changing the slogan a little bit
opened the door,
made the big difference there.
And so it was conducted, and it was, obviously it was still Islamic State, so you have to be careful. Everyone who responded had to be careful that their backs were covered, because family members could kill them for just approaching a Christian church with the intent of of receiving counseling or receiving receiving Jesus. And so much of the counseling was done under the cover of night, of darkness. We heard many stories of people who were being counseled that night, just like Nicodemus was. Mm-hmm. and because they were afraid of what might happen to them. Nicodemus might have been afraid. That's why he came to Jesus at night.
Yeah.
He's afraid to lose his position or to his job, maybe. But there was a huge response. I mean, from many, many cities. Syria, even across the border in Syria, Syria State TV wanted to come with a camera crew to do a special report on the megacity campaign taking place. There was a group of 200 employees from a big Iraqi radio station in the city of Sulaymaniyah, which is just eastward from Erbil. And they wanted to come to the special event. There was a special event that was going to be held, which was held, and they wanted to come. And I remember how apprehensive our staff members or the church volunteers were there, saying, we don't know who these people are. 200 Muslims want to come, to this special event. I mean, they could be anybody. But finally, they were allowed to come, and it was a huge success. Josh McDowell spoke in that particular meeting from America, which was rather unique. And in any case, one of the great stories that came out of that was about a year later. The phone rang in our studio in Finland, thousands of miles away, and it was the son of the president of northern Iraq. And he said, I just wanted to tell you that the Power to Change book that I received when I called in to ask for my copy, he said, has been my devotional every single day since the campaign. It's been a year now. And he said, I just wanted to tell you that I am in love with Jesus. And that was a huge statement and a step of faith for him to say that. But shortly thereafter, huge hostilities broke loose, and of course the caliphate started to gain momentum, and the security situation deteriorated drastically. Now, Erbil is still the most peaceful city in all of Iraq today, in the city where we conducted the megacity campaign, which is kind of like, interesting. But Erbil is also located 80 kilometers southeast of Mosul, which is better known for those who know the Bible as Nineveh. The ruins of Nineveh are in Mosul. Now, Mosul became the home base for the caliphate, for this new ISIS movement. They overtook Mosul, and they blew up Jonah's tomb. They destroyed it as one of the first things they did when they occupied Mosul. And so, but just next door, 80 kilometers away, is Erbil, which is a bastion of peace, a stronghold where we had conducted the megacity campaign, something we thought we could never do.
Do you have any stories that would identify the story to a Muslim?
Yeah, in Mumbai, we received a phone call from a Muslim family, and so when the book courier went to deliver the book, there was actually 2 young men in the house. One of them had been in a car accident, and he could not be treated medically. And then the other brother said to him, I actually called in to receive the book. And he said, now, are you Christians? And then the book courier said, yes, we are. He said, do you pray for people? He said, we do. Do you pray for sick people? We do. I said, well, I want you to pray for my brother. He says, he's been in a serious accident, and there's nothing that the doctors can do for him. But if you pray for sick people, we want you to do it now. The book courier was not a healer, never intended to be. He's just a follower of Jesus, wanted to just deliver a book and say, Jesus can save your soul. And these guys are expecting this book courier to turn into a healer, basically.
So the book courier didn't have any kind of a healing ministry?
No, absolutely no. No, they were never even asked to do that. They were just asked to deliver a book and talk to people about Jesus, who is a healer now. So what happened was, the book courier told the story. He said, though I had my heart, it was my throat. I was extremely nervous, and I wasn't even sure what was going to happen. I mean, obviously I thought that nothing would happen. So, but I just prayed because out of obedience. They said pray, so I said I had to pray. So I prayed for the for the other brother, and he was healed instantly before my eyes and the eyes of the brother. And they both gave their lives to Jesus right after that because of what they saw happening. It was a miracle. We have seen many, many stories of people, or heard of stories, where people actually, through healing, became followers of Jesus because they saw the power of God.
Yeah.
People really respond dramatically when they see the power of God working in their lives physically.
Yeah. Now, you haven't talked about the 1 million books and then the 5 million requests. And
In Russia, we did, over the last 10 years, we did 40 mega cities because we believed that we needed to step up the intensity of evangelism to help the churches step up their intensity of doing evangelism, so it would be much more intense and much more impactful. And so we did 40 cities with them, and miraculously God supplied the needs for that. There's a huge price tag to that. But we saw the doors in Russia start to close, for the gospel, and regarding, outreach. Churches today are very, very restricted in what they can do because of President Putin's policies today inside Russia. And so after those 40 cities were done, a couple of years went by, and we have received a request from one of the largest Christian denominations, or the largest Christian denomination outside the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia, which has over 2,000 churches. They asked us to supply them with 1 million copies of the same book in condensed form that we used in the 40 cities of Russia, plus Ukraine and also Central Asia, which used to belong to the Soviet Union. And so we did. We printed 1 million books, and we gave it to them. They were printed in Novosibirsk in Central Siberia and distributed throughout Russia, and put into the hands of the churches. And they, of course, they had teams of volunteers, continuously on the streets, highways, and byways, talking to people, leading them to Jesus and giving them the book, using the book as a tool. A little more than a year later, we received news, through the upper leadership of this huge denomination, where the leadership was saying, "Thank you for those 1 million books. By the way, our churches and our teams in all of our churches have reported, and the reporting has come in, and our people have prayed for 1 million people on the streets to receive Jesus. They have prayed the prayer of salvation, having received the book at the same time, and that book has been the key tool, the primary tool in evangelism and in outreach, which the churches have used. And the fruit is 1 million people have prayed to receive Jesus to date." Not many months later, we received another request. And this time, the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, had broken out, and it was looking very bad, and it still is. The churches have said, "We need 5 million more books. We want to put everything we have available to us, all of our volunteers, all of our church members, we want to put them to work, and to distribute the books, and to reach out to people as much as they can, because this is the only avenue of ministry that we have left. We have been stripped of everything else, of all of our possibilities. This is all we have left, and it's not everywhere. In some regions they have already started to close. But he said, we need 5 million books for the next whatever time we have left. And there was a big urgency in the voice of the leadership. They said, if things continue to progress the way they are progressing now, then Russia will not only close down regarding the gospel, but things could get worse, and could be even worse than the churches had experienced in the Soviet Union. Persecution could become worse in Russia. That was their quote. We have another 800,000 books that have already been printed as I speak, and we're hoping that we'll be able to print hundreds of thousands, perhaps a couple of, maybe 2, 3, 4 million more, depending on how the financial resources for that particular request come in. That puts a lot of urgency on this, and we want to supply Russia with whatever we can.